The moment my son said, "Meet Grizzly Bear," I knew something was terribly wrong. The forest around me was silent, too silent. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until your own heartbeat sounds like a drum. I stood there on the narrow dirt trail, my backpack half-zipped, while my son Jason slowly stepped backward toward the truck. "Jason, what are you doing?" I asked, forcing a nervous laugh. He didn't laugh back. Instead, he looked at me with a strange, cold expression I had never seen before. "You wanted to reconnect, Dad," he said. "Enjoy nature." Then he climbed into the truck. The engine started, and before I could process what was happening, the tires spun against the gravel and the truck disappeared down the winding forest road, leaving me alone, completely alone, in Grizzly territory. How it all began. 2 weeks earlier, Jason had called me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken much since his mother died 5 years ago. Grief does strange things to families. Sometimes it pulls people together. Sometimes it drives them apart. With us, it built a wall. Jason blamed me for moving out of our family home too quickly. He said I was trying to erase his mother. But that wasn't true. I was just trying to survive the emptiness. So when my phone rang and his name appeared on the screen, my heart nearly stopped. "Hey, Dad," he said. 3 simple words. But they meant everything. We talked for almost an hour that night. He told me about his job, his apartment, his girlfriend. I told him about the small woodworking shop I had started. By the end of the call, he said something that made my chest warm. "Maybe we should do something together, like old times." "Like what?" I asked. "Camping," he said. "When Jason was a kid, camping was our thing. Every summer we'd disappear into the mountains with nothing but a tent, fishing rods, and a cooler. Those were the happiest memories of my life." So of course I said yes. The trip. We drove 6 hours into the mountains. Jason was quiet during most of the drive, but I assumed it was just awkwardness. After all, 5 years of distance doesn't disappear overnight. Still, something felt off. Whenever I tried to talk about the past, he changed the subject. Whenever I mentioned his mom, his jaw tightened. By the time we reached the forest trailhead, the sun was already dipping behind the mountains. "This area is perfect," Jason said. I noticed something strange right away. There were no other cars. No campers. No hikers. Just us. "You sure this is the right place?" I asked. "Trust me," he said. Those 2 words would echo in my mind for hours later. The walk. We hiked about 2 miles into the forest. The trees were massive, towering pines that blocked out most of the sky. The air smelled like damp earth and moss. Normally, I would have loved it. But the deeper we walked, the more uneasy I felt. Then I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. "Jason," I said quietly, "where's your backpack?" He shrugged. "I left it in the truck." "Why?" "We won't need it." That was when I should have turned around. But I didn't. Because he was my son. And I trusted him. The abandonment. We reached a clearing just as twilight began to fade. Jason stopped walking. "This is the spot," he said. "For the campsite?" I asked. He shook his head. "For you." That's when he said it. "Meet Grizzly Bear." At first, I thought it was a joke. But then he walked away. Calmly. Coldly. Leaving me behind. Realization. For a full minute, I stood frozen. My brain refused to accept what had happened. But eventually, the truth settled like ice in my chest. My son had just abandoned me in the wilderness. And this wasn't just any forest. Earlier on the drive, we had passed a large sign. "Warning, active grizzly bear habitat." My hands began to shake. Night was falling. The temperature was dropping. And somewhere in the darkness, something large might already be watching. Survival instinct. I forced myself to think. Panicking would get me killed. First rule of the wilderness, stay calm. Second rule, make yourself less vulnerable. I searched the area quickly. About 50 yards away stood a large fallen tree. Its trunk was thick and partially hollow, big enough to crawl inside. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than standing in the open. I gathered branches and rocks along the way and climbed into the hollow trunk. Then I waited. The forest grew darker. The sounds began. Cracking branches, distant howls, wind whispering through the trees. And once, very close by, the unmistakable heavy thud of massive footsteps. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain whatever creature was out there could hear it. The longest night. Hours crawled by. I barely moved. Every rustle of leaves made my pulse spike. At one point, something large walked through the clearing. I couldn't see it clearly in the darkness, but I heard it breathing. Deeper. Slow. Powerful. A bear. It sniffed the air for what felt like forever. Then finally wandered away. I didn't breathe again for several minutes. Inside that hollow tree, something inside me changed. Not fear. Something colder. Something sharper. Understanding. My son hadn't just abandoned me. He had planned this. Which meant one thing. He expected me not to survive the night. The truth hits. As I sat there shivering in the darkness, memories began connecting like puzzle pieces. Jason asking if I still owned the cabin property. Jason asking about my savings. Jason asking if I had written a will. At the time, I thought he was just making conversation. Now I understood. If I died out here, it would look like a tragic accident. A lost hiker. A bear attack. And Jason would inherit everything. My house. My land. My business. My life's work. Dawn. Eventually, the black sky turned gray. Birds began chirping. The forest slowly came back to life. And against all odds, I was still alive. My muscles ached and my throat was dry, but I crawled out of the hollow tree with a strange sense of calm. Then I heard it. A vehicle approaching. Jason's truck. He stepped out, walking slowly into the clearing. And when he saw me standing there, his face turned white. The confrontation. "You're alive," he whispered. I looked him straight in the eyes. Disappointed. He said nothing, but his silence said everything. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Finally he spoke. I thought the bears would. He stopped himself. Too late. I had heard enough. The twist. Then I said something he definitely didn't expect. "Funny thing about last night," I said calmly. "I wasn't alone." His eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Jason's face drained of color. "You recorded." I nodded. "Everything." Before the trip, I had turned on a continuous audio recorder on my phone, a habit I developed after a dispute with a former business partner years earlier. And when Jason said those words, "Meet Grizzly Bear," they were recorded perfectly, along with the sound of his truck driving away. The final blow. Jason's hands began to tremble. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would," I interrupted. I looked at the truck, then back at him. But here's the interesting part. I smiled slightly. I already sent the recording to 3 people before the trip. His eyes widened. "My lawyer." an old friend in the police department, and your Aunt Linda. If anything happened to me, I continued, they were instructed to open the file. Jason staggered back like he had been punched. You planned this, he whispered. No, I said quietly. But I prepared for it. The ride back. The drive down the mountain was silent. Jason didn't say a word. Neither did I. But when we reached the highway, I finally spoke. Pull over. He did. I stepped out of the truck, then leaned back down toward the window. You tried to feed your father to a bear, I said calmly. That's something you'll have to live with. Jason looked like he might cry. But I felt nothing. Just a strange, peaceful clarity. The aftermath. I pressed charges. Attempted manslaughter. The evidence was undeniable. The recording. The location. The fact that he left me without supplies. Jason eventually took a plea deal. 5 years in prison. I didn't attend the sentencing. Some people thought I was heartless. But they didn't spend that night in the forest, listening for the sound of something large walking through the darkness. 5 years later. Last month, Jason wrote me a letter from prison. He said he was sorry. He said greed had blinded him. He said he hoped someday I might forgive him. I haven't replied yet. Maybe someday I will. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And trust, once broken like that, rarely grows back.